Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk, ICRT's weekly interview segment, bringing you conversations from and about Taiwan. I'm Keith Manconi. On today's show, we're going to be featuring a conversation that I had with Amal Chao recently. Amal is a member of the Taipei Muslim community and also an attendee of the Taipei Grand Mosque. And basically, we're going to be talking about ongoing government efforts to make Taiwan an easier place for Muslims to live and travel. And, well, what we're going to be trying to get at is what these proposals actually mean to practicing Muslims in Taiwan. So, just to give you a heads up, what you're going to be hearing here is basically me asking a lot of fairly dumb, basic questions about practicing Islam in Taiwan, and then Amal graciously and patiently answering them one by one. I'm not selling this very well, but really, I feel I took a lot away from this conversation, and I'm very grateful to Amal for sharing her perspective with me. So with that in mind, here is my conversation with Amal Chao. Amal Chao, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
So over the last couple of months, I've been hearing news reports probably out once a week or so of, the Taipei city government, the Taichung city government, all of these government officials basically saying that they're trying to make Taiwan a little bit more friendly to the Muslim community. And they're approaching this in a number of different ways, whether it's making more prayer rooms available or whether it's making halal meals a little bit easier to get to. We're hearing a lot about this. And I've been reporting on this. I've been talking about this with other people on air at ICRT. And every time I do report on it, I always... it sounds like a really cool thing, and it's always good for Taiwan to be more inclusive, but I get halfway through the report and I just realize I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what any of this stuff means. I don't know what it would mean to a practicing Muslim, what having these extra resources would actually change. So that's really one of the things I'm hoping we can talk about today, so you can explain to those of us who don't have this background and understand what this really means to a practicing Muslim. But before we even get into the specifics, can you just say, in general, when you hear these government officials say this kind of stuff, what's your reaction? What does that mean to you?
I think it's very beneficial for us from our point of view, since praying and having halal meat are one of the most important things in our lives, because we pray 5 times a day, and it has a certain time routine to it, and it's something that we practice every day several times. And on top of that, we require clean area, preferably, and a quiet area. So having a prayer room for us is something very, very important.
All right, and tell us a little bit about what kind of challenges would you have if... So we're talking about prayer rooms are going to be set up at rest stops on major roads. We're hearing that there's even going to be a prayer room inside Taipei City Hall. So would that be a really big challenge? Say if you're a government worker working at City Hall, there's no prayer room, or if you're somebody who's trying to travel across Taiwan, would that really disrupt your day if those kind of resources weren't there?
I think it would be more difficult because we have to make up the prayers once we get back to our house or to a hotel room, for instance. Yeah. And even though I think it's more convenient for travelers and for tourists, these kind of facilities. Yeah, because if we're working outside, we usually pray in the office.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when these officials are talking about this stuff, they are saying that they are going to focus on tourists. But of course, Taiwan also has a number of both Taiwanese citizens and guest workers from abroad who are also Muslim, who not tourists at all, they're residents. What do you make of this emphasis on tourists?
I think it's because the number of tourists, the Muslim tourists, are increasing, and also to encourage tourists from Southeast Asia to come.
Right.
Yeah. Or from China. Yes.
But I mean, do you get any sense? I mean, I think the local population is equally important. Is there any feeling that, for example, the migrant workers from Indonesia, I mean, are they being overlooked? Would this emphasis on tourism overlook, the local Muslim community?
I think the focus is on tourists, but what I know is that, for example, there are a lot of Indonesians in Taiwan at the moment. And I know that many of them have their own community or praying centers that they have around their living community. So for them, unless they're traveling a lot, I guess, for them or for us, I'm not really used to praying outside. So these kind of facilities, to be honest, they're not very beneficial for me as for tourists.
So I mean, would there still be challenges then for you, as a practicing Muslim in Taiwan, or do you feel like mostly your needs are met? You're basically okay? I
think I'm basically okay because I grew up in Taiwan, so I have a routine of my own. But of course, it'll be very beneficial for me if I travel long distance.
So for people that are new to a place, it just makes things easier for them.
Yes.
They don't have to learn so much. What about halal then? I mean, a lot of cities are boasting the fact that they're opening new halal restaurants, getting more options out there. Have you noticed a change over the last couple of years?
Yes, of course. It's very obvious.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. Halal, because it's something that it affects our meal. And there have been quite many halal certified restaurants, but most of them again are focused in hotels. Mainly are in hotels, and local restaurants have not increased that much.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So would it be a challenge? I mean, even if you're cooking for yourself, would it be a challenge to find halal ingredients in Taiwan?
Oh, it's been improving recently. Over the years, there are private companies that started selling halal ingredients, halal meat, which I think has been very helpful to us. What
would you say is the main significance of this change? Is it before, would it just be hard to find tasty food completely?
Well, I think one thing it has helped the Taiwanese community to understand our lifestyle.
And maybe for folks that don't know, you could explain a little bit what kind of requirements halal dining entails.
The word halal actually means legal. So anything legal includes act of worship or behavior or relationship. When it comes to food, we have certain requirements that we have to meet, which is, for example, the meat we eat has to be slaughtered by a Muslim because there are certain ways of slaughtering. And we do not consume alcohol or blood or animal that has died on its own or is infected by disease.
So night markets would be a little bit difficult to attend.
Yes,
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
So we usually go for vegetarian or seafood, which are the safer options.
What about like clams or shellfish?
Yeah, that's fine. But we have to ask if it's cooked in broth or do they put alcohol while they're cooking?
So really, if you have these halal certified shops, it just means that you have to think less about...
that's true.
Less work going into every meal. Now, something else that's sort of related, but actually doesn't have anything to do with the government. Uniqlo, the Japanese clothing retailer, recently announced that they are going to be marketing a brand of Muslim hijabs in Taiwan and making that available. I read some people reacting to this, basically saying that before you kind of had to search out clothing options, sometimes go to order online or go to Indonesian import stores. What is this news that you heard about?
Yes. Again, I think it's more convenient for female customers. Yeah. because especially in the summer, for the women who cover up, who wear the hijab, it's not very easy for us to find long sleeves or long length skirts for us. Yeah.
So just generally more convenience and more options?
Yeah.
What would you have done before? Where would you have gotten the clothes?
I get it from the night market.
Oh, so even before it was still possible to find it
It's
in the night market?
possible because the trend we have now is quite different from before. It's the loose fitting clothes are more popular. The long length dresses are more popular. So it's easier for us now.
So there's definitely style trends in Muslim clothing.
Yeah, there is. Just like any other fashion trend, yeah.
And would Uniqlo be able to keep up with those trends, do you think?
Hopefully.
I want to switch topics a little bit and just go to maybe a little bit broader of a picture here. So you worship at the Taipei Grand Mosque, but it's not the only mosque in Taiwan, and Taipei is not the only city in Taiwan that has a Muslim population. Could you just share with us a little bit about what you know about the Muslim community in Taiwan?
We have around 60,000 Taiwanese Muslims and about 200,000 foreign Muslims living in Taiwan at the moment. And
most of those would be, many of them would be guest workers from Indonesia.
Yes, mostly. And within the Taiwanese community, most of us are from China, from the minority, the Hui minority. And there's also an increasing population of Muslim converts in Taiwan, which has increased after 9/11.
So those would be Han Chinese in Taiwan.
Yes.
And for you, so you grew up in Saudi Arabia and also Taiwan, and so just growing up here. Could give us some sense of what was it like being a practicing Muslim in Taiwan growing up here? Were there any challenges? Was it something you didn't think about too much?
Well, in the beginning, even until now, the major challenge is with halal meat. Because that is something that we face every day, a couple of times every day. But once we know where to find and what other options we have, it's made it very much easier. And another thing is having to explain or to introduce Islam to the people around us.
Are people generally pretty curious?
Yes, they are.
And what kind of questions do they ask?
Very basic questions, like why cannot you eat this and why cannot you eat that? Or do you actually pray, or do you really cover up your face? Or just very general questions that are media oriented, I think.
And when you hear the tone of those questions, I mean, does it come off as just friendly curiosity, or do you ever feel like people may have some fears associated with those questions?
Mostly are just out of curiosity. Yes.
Is there any way, I mean, growing up here, was there any way where you felt like there was any conflict between your own Taiwanese identity and, practicing Islam? I've read a couple of practitioners kind of just talking about how the lifestyle in Taiwan, where you work really hard and then you go out and you karaoke all night, makes it difficult for some young Muslims to practice consistently. Did you ever experience anything like that?
I think it changes gradually when I grew up. When I was younger, yes, there were times that I would think that why do we have to do this, and why do we have to wake up in the middle of the night and to fast, for example. But as I grow up, I've learned more and I've actually accepted more. So things have been getting easier and easier for me.
How do you? So you mean the practices make more sense to you now, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, they make more sense, and I think that we can have the lifestyle in Taiwan and also practice at the same time. It just depends on how you segment your timings and yeah.
Do you still find time to go out and do karaoke?
Well, I don't like karaoke.
Well, that makes it easy then.
Yeah.
But I mean, are there a lot of, for example, office workers that might find it difficult to, stick to the prayer routine, stick to the attending service on Fridays, to stick to all of that?
Well, during these kind of cases, one thing that I would say is that because of the environment is like this, so sometimes you don't have to be so hard on yourself. We can always make up the prayers. Mm-hmm. For example, when we have a meeting during a certain prayer time, you cannot just say that I have to go pray because the rest of the team has to go on with the meeting. So we just make it up whenever you have a break time or, yeah.
So it's accommodating both ways.
Yeah.
That was actually another, I believe, call that was made by some leaders in the Muslim community to accommodate certain religious holidays and make it easier for workers that are probably quite busy to attend those holidays.
Yes.
Have bosses and managers, have they been responsive to those kinds of calls? Have they been willing to accommodate a little bit?
I think it depends. Mm-hmm. But I understand that it's not very easy for the Taiwanese community to accept this kind of...
just jumping out of work?
Yeah, probably.
So they don't quite understand why it's necessary?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, I think it's probably because even though majority of Taiwanese are Buddhist or Taoist, but many of them, I know that they're not fully practicing. So certain holidays or religious holidays might not be that important for them as for other people who are really actually practicing.
Right.
Yeah. And speaking of religious holidays, the major one that we have is the one after Ramadan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that one is actually the only major one that we celebrate, which is like the Chinese New Year or the Christmas.
So it has that level of significance. And yeah, I mean, as many people in North America, even if they're not religious, they are more likely to observe Christmas or expect some time off on Christmas, or because even if they're not religious, they want to spend more time with their
the family. Yes.
Right. And so if for any minority group in Taiwan, that poses some challenges. So I'm sure it does for the Muslim community as well.
So what I try to do is try to explain it the other way. For example, like how I just mentioned, that that is equally important as the Chinese New Year holiday to the Chinese community.
Right.
Yeah.
And are people generally fairly responsive when you put it that way? Do they go, oh yeah, I get it?
Yeah. Then they understand.
Yeah, and that's kind of the other interesting thing about the way that religion is kind of treated in Taiwan is if you go to a temple in Taiwan, oftentimes the various artifacts and the idols, they can be from all over the place. They can be from many different religions. People here don't have such strict ideas about what fits into this religion or that religion. They don't necessarily have such strict ideas about what sorts of religious practices need to be done. Different families buy in different ways. So would that make it hard for people in Taiwan to understand Islam, where there are, in some ways, somewhat more strict practices? I
think it is a little bit, because the base of the religion is a little bit different. In Islam, we worship one God, whereas in Buddhism and in Taoism, there are many gods. Yeah. So that could be a little bit difficult to understand in the beginning. And then once you talk through it a little bit more, then it makes more sense, I guess.
And so just in general, I mean, would you point to any challenges that the Muslim community faces in Taiwan?
I think it's a little bit more political. When it comes to a political issue, then it becomes, it's something that we get pointed at.
Like, would you be referring to, all the reports of terrorism around the world? And do you think that people in Taiwan associate Islam practitioners with terrorism here?
What I've seen from the internet, for people who have Muslim friends, they don't have this kind of issue. But for people who do not have Muslim friends, they don't know what Islam really is to Muslim, then I think it would be a little bit difficult for them to understand. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is it's really all just about having conversations and getting to know people.
Yeah, but another thing is, I think it's for people who have a faith of religion, for example, Christianity, they're very extremes. There are certain people who are very understanding, and other people who might get very rough on their thoughts about Islam. Yeah.
And have you run into any of that?
I think I'm grateful that most of the people that I met are quite understanding.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. But I mean, again, I mean, it does sound like you're saying that getting to know the community and actually having friends and having some level of understanding does make a difference.
Yes. Oh, another thing that I've heard, but that was many years back, that there are certain employers, that cannot accept women employees wearing hijab in Taiwan. So I've heard that there were people who actually faced this problem where the employer asked them to either leave the job or remove the hijab. Yeah.
Did that usually end with them leaving the job?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that was many years back. But now, because of the increasing number of Muslim people and the media itself, I think generally it has been changed and improved.
And again, that kind of just goes back, I think, to what you were saying about actually knowing somebody who is a practitioner and knowing what it means to them. In terms of understanding why it would be so important for them to wear a hijab. Just on a personal note, I mean, would you personally see any contradictions between, being somebody who's identifies as Taiwan, but then also a practicing Muslim? Like, for example, in the U.S., like a lot of my Christian friends going to college, a lot of the things that would be just considered normal in college, going out late, drinking, partying, other stuff, they didn't feel comfortable participating in, and they had to find their own creative ways to kind of get into that group and make it normal for them. I had one friend that he just, even though he never drank a drop in his life, he acted drunk all the time just so that he felt more comfortable at parties. And it worked. He actually, he said that he felt drunk. And so whatever worked for him. But is there ever that kind of accommodation that you need to do to just break into whatever local scene there is?
Yes, but when I was in college, there were, everybody has some experience with when they're young, but I didn't really have a problem or issue with that because in the beginning, I explained to my friends what my religion is and what my kind of lifestyle is. So when it comes to these kind of, for example, partying or drinking, then they kind of understand.
Wow.
And
was this in Taiwan?
Yeah, in Taiwan.
Well, people in Taiwan are much more understanding than in the U.S. We were always trying to get them to drink.
Well, they do. They do the same thing to me. They said, this tastes so good. Do you want to try? This is really good. Do you want to have some ro fan or this or that? And I will say no, of course. But they say, oh, you're missing so much.
So they put some pressure on you.
Yeah, but again, I think I take it quite easily. Yeah.
You just got to smile your way through it.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to get creative with your response, or did people eventually just kind of leave you alone?
I think sometimes you have to get creative because some people might get quite pushy.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
So how did you respond in those cases?
I just don't go. Well, I think it depends on the kind of parties or who you're hanging out with. Yeah.
Does anything like that persist into later life? I remember, I actually, across the street when I was growing up, there was a Jewish family. And we kind of had, I guess you could call it a symbiotic relationship, because there's a part of the year where the dietary restrictions get really restrictive in Judaism. And all the food that they couldn't eat would come over to our refrigerator, and we would take it from them because we didn't care. We didn't have any of that, and so we would kind of help them out in that way. But I guess I'm more asking about like are there any times where you know as an adult you have to find creative ways to adapt in Taiwan?
For example, like now, what we've been doing is when we have gathering, I prepare the meat. So I think
it'll be okay for everybody.
Yeah, it'll be okay for everybody, and I think that I prepare the meat or the meal, the food itself, and people bring drinks or dessert or whatever.
But you still have guests of many different faiths coming over.
Yeah, so we do it according to everyone's needs.
Yeah. So you start with the most restrictive dietary needs, and then everybody there is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Another thing is, well, I'm not sure if it really makes a difference, but I've heard that from my friends, they say that halal meat, for example, halal beef tastes much better. So I actually know a friend of mine, her dad actually goes to the halal shop and buys the meat for
Even
the
though
family.
he's not Muslim?
No. And
he just likes the taste.
Yeah, and they like it. So during the gatherings, there are also friends who they prepare for us, and because they know our restrictions and our needs, then I don't have to say anything or bring anything. They have it
there for you already.
Yes.
Well, that makes it a little bit easier. And I guess if it really does taste better, then that means that your parties will be more well attended. More people will want to come over.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, I feel like I have learned a fair amount today, and we've been learning this all from Amal Chao. She is a member of the Taipei Muslim community and an attendee of the Taipei Grand Mosque. Amal, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is it for the show today. Taiwan Talk, of course, broadcasts every Monday at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., right after the top of the hour newscast. Look for that on ICRT FM 100. You can also find the show online. That's where we put extended versions of the show, such as the podcast that you were just listening to right here. Look for that on iTunes, the ICRT website, and the ICRT blog, occasionally, if I have time to make a post about it. Also, just want to make a quick note that I will be posting a quick little blog post for the show today with some links to some of the recent news on this topic. Basically, just going into a little bit more depth what all some of these programs were that are trying to make practicing Muslims' lives easier while they're either living or traveling through Taiwan. So you can see some of the news that we were talking about here right there if you're interested in English, by the way. That is it for the show today. We're going to have to wrap it up there. So for ICRT and Taiwan Talk, thank you all for listening very much. I am Keith Manconi. Hope to see you next time.